Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a stubborn veteran, a rusted army tractor, and a power-hungry HOA president collide in rural Texas, sparks fly. What starts as a petty fine ignites a full-blown war over land, law, and pride. And only one side will walk away with the road. I never thought a rusted-out army tractor could spark a war. But here we are. The damn thing had been sitting near the turnoff to my main hangar for years. Faded olive green, cracked vinyl seat, dented grill from who knows what decade. And I liked it that way. It was mine. I dragged it here myself after leaving Fort Hood in the early 2000s. Had it craned onto a trailer like some ancient relic, because it was one, a memory on 4 wheels. No engine, no use, just parked like a sentry watching over my land. I never imagined anyone would care. The property it stood on wasn't just any land. I own 180 acres of North Texas dust, trees, and ridgelines. Old family land, passed down through 3 generations of Westons, officially deeded to me when my father died. My ranch sits well away from the paved world. It's got an old ranch house, a few prefab hangars I rent out to mechanics and small businesses, and a dirt road, my dirt road, that winds a good 1.25 miles through my land. The county recognizes it as the Weston Easement Route. It's not a suggestion, it's on file, surveyed, and stamped. About 5 years back, I made what I thought was a neighborly gesture. Sage Hills Estates, that fancy HOA community down the ridge, had been pestering the county for a new access route. But geography laughed in their faces. Their only paved entry was narrow, steep, and prone to washouts. Meanwhile, my road ran nice and flat right into their rear gate. So in 2019, we struck a deal. I let them use the road for free. No money exchanged, just a formal easement agreement. They stay the hell out of my affairs, and I let them roll through in peace. No contact, no complaints, no drama. It worked. Until now. Until Karen Avery. Karen moved into Sage Hills 6 months ago, and somehow, within 3, she got herself elected president of the HOA. I don't know if she blackmailed the last guy or poisoned the board with sugar cookies, but the second she got power, the tone changed. The first sign was subtle, a generic letter from the HOA reminding all participants in shared infrastructure that community standards extended to roadside presentation. I ignored it. My land wasn't theirs. I wasn't under their flag. Then came the email, a formal notice of violation addressed to me by name from the Sage Hills HOA Compliance Committee, signed by none other than Karen herself. It accused me of visual pollution, derelict equipment presence, and offensive aesthetic disruption due to the presence of a non-operational tractor visible from shared access. She fined me $1,200, $1,200 for a memory on my own goddamn land. At first I thought it was a joke. I called their office. A woman answered, cheerful and dead inside. HOA office, Sage Hills Estates, how can I help you? This is Clint Weston. I just got a violation notice about a tractor on my property. I'm not part of your HOA. Pause, then a sigh. Yes, Mr. Weston, I'm aware, but the tractor is visible from the road, which constitutes visual influence on the shared access corridor. Under our updated policy, I cut her off. Shared access corridor? Lady, that road belongs to me. That's not your road. She cleared her throat. With respect, sir, the HOA reserves the right to enforce community presentation standards along any infrastructure impacting the visual harmony of Sage Hills. That's when I knew this wasn't a mistake. This was Karen's war cry. She was trying to make a point. And I had a feeling I knew what it was. 2 days later, another letter arrived, this time by certified mail. More formal language, same nonsense. This one had photos attached, aerial shots, angled images taken directly above my property, including my shop yard and the rear of my barn. They'd used a drone, a damn HOA drone. They had flown a camera over my private land without permission. I sat on the porch, holding the letter in one hand, sipping black coffee with the other, staring at that photo of the old tractor like it had betrayed me. It hadn't moved in 10 years, but suddenly it was evidence in a war I didn't ask for. The more I thought about it, the quieter I got. That kind of quiet that isn't calm. The kind where gears are turning in the back of your skull. I wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. Karen thought she could poke the bear and walk away. Fine. Let's see what happens when the bear stands up. I didn't waste time. The morning after that drone letter, I marched straight into my home office, flipped open the fireproof safe under the desk, and pulled out the original signed agreement from 2019. I had every page scanned, notarized, and backed up 6 ways from Sunday. I sat there at my old wooden desk, flipping through the clauses until I found the one I remembered. Section 7, Subsection C, Revocation of Access Rights in Case of Interference. Simple language. Legal teeth. Should any member, officer, or representative of the Sage Hills Estates Homeowners Association engage in conduct that infringes upon the autonomy or operations of Weston Ranch, the grantor reserves the right to immediately revoke access rights to the Weston easement route, effective upon written notice. I read it 3 times just to let the weight of it settle. Then I called Jennifer. Jennifer Campbell is the kind of lawyer who makes corporate Goliath sweat and sleeps with a folder of precedent cases next to her nightstand. I met her during a zoning dispute over a hangar lease years ago. Since then, she's been on retainer, mostly quiet, until today. When I explained the situation, she didn't interrupt. Just let me talk, made 1 or 2 dry comments about typical HOA mission creep, and then said, "You want to hit the kill switch?" "Pull it," I said. Within 48 hours, she had drawn up the termination notice. We sent it via registered mail, email, and hand-delivered it with a courier just for the cherry on top. HOA received it on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, the gates were already halfway welded. I hired a crew I trusted, folks I knew from when we built the hangars. They brought in reinforced steel posts, buried them deep, installed a dual-swing gate system with a 4-digit passcode, and reinforced the corners with boulders from my own quarry pile. I made sure the entryway was smooth, paved, and extremely off-limits. Above the gate, I mounted a fresh sign. Big white letters on a matte black background. Private road. No HOA access. Trespassers will be prosecuted underneath that. Smaller, but still legible. Access revoked as of date. See county records. I knew damn well they'd send someone to take pictures. I wanted the message crystal clear, both for the real world and whatever self-righteous HOA newsletter they'd be printing. By Wednesday morning, the first panic calls started. A delivery truck tried to access Sage Hills via my road and found the gate locked. He turned around and used the backup route, a twisty, eroded mess of gravel and brush that made your kidneys scream. Then the residents started noticing. First, it was a trickle of complaints in their neighborhood Facebook group. Then it was outrage. One particularly loud resident, a guy named Mr. Rutledge, emailed me directly, demanding I restore the shared access route immediately. I replied with 2 words, private road. By Thursday afternoon, I watched from my porch as a blue Lexus rolled up to the gate. The driver got out. A woman in a white blouse and pearl earrings stormed up to the keypad, punched in a random code, then stood staring at the access denied screen like it had insulted her mother. She looked around, saw the sign, snapped a picture, and stormed back to her car. I recognized her from the local real estate ads. Karen Avery, president of the HOA. She'd finally realized the road she just lost wasn't a courtesy. It was a lifeline, but I wasn't done. I brought out my trail cam footage. The drone from the HOA had flown directly over the barnyard, dipping well past the agreed boundary. The footage, time-stamped and GPS tagged, showed it lingering above my roof for a solid minute. I sent it to Jennifer. She replied within 5 minutes. "We're building a file." In the following days, I caught glimpses of HOA board members lurking near the gate, some pacing, some filming. I didn't engage. I didn't need to. Every moment they spent there just made my case stronger. Meanwhile, the alternative road through the hills began turning into a muddy pit, thanks to early spring rain and zero maintenance. SUVs were bottoming out. One woman lost her front bumper on a buried rock. Amazon drivers started refusing deliveries. The panic was turning into pressure, and the pressure was turning on Karen. Exactly as I intended. By Friday morning, the storm had officially arrived. I woke up to the sound of tires crunching gravel outside my fence line and the faint echo of voices arguing. When I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee, I saw a sheriff's cruiser parked by the gate and another vehicle behind it. A black SUV with Sage Hills HOA decals on the doors. Perfect. Karen Avery had brought law enforcement to my front gate. I guess she thought the badge would scare me into opening it. I walked down slowly, letting them stew. The sheriff on duty that day was Deputy Alan Henson, a tall, sunburned man I'd met once when a wild hog tore through my fence last year. He knew who I was. He also knew how to keep his expression blank when trouble started brewing. Karen, on the other hand, couldn't hide her fury if she tried. Her hair was perfectly arranged, her lips a tight red line, her pearl earrings glinting like warning lights. She pointed at me the second I came within 20 feet. "There, that's him. He's the one who's illegally barricaded the road, stranding 28 families. Do something." Alan turned to me, his face unreadable. "Morning, Clint. Mind explaining what's going on here?" "Sure," I said, handing him a thick folder. "That's my property deed, the easement agreement from 2019, and the revocation notice I served this week. Everything's stamped and filed. The HOA violated the terms by flying drones and issuing fake fines. I exercised my right to terminate access. It's all legal." Karen crossed her arms. "That can't be true. The road connects directly to our subdivision. It's shared infrastructure. You can't just decide." Alan flipped through the pages. "Says here it's recorded under private ownership. Easement's voluntary, not public right-of-way." He looked up at her. "Ma'am, unless you can show me a court order saying otherwise, this is private land. He's within his rights." Karen's face went pale, then flushed bright red. "But he's trapping us. We have elderly residents, delivery trucks, school buses." "Maybe you should have thought of that before sending drones over my barn," I said quietly. Alan shot me a look, half amusement, half warning. "Let's keep it civil, folks." But Karen wasn't about to quit. "I'll have you know, Deputy, this man is endangering lives. He's creating a blockade. I want him arrested for obstruction." Alan sighed. "Ma'am, obstruction doesn't apply to private property. You'll need to take this up in civil court. This isn't a criminal matter." That didn't go over well. She started yelling about calling the county commissioner, the mayor, even the governor, if she had to. Alan took off his hat, rubbed his forehead, and told her politely to step back. Then he turned to me and muttered, "You sure know how to piss off the right people." "Just doing my part for property rights," I said with a grin. When they left, I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong. By the evening, a news van pulled up on the main road outside the gate. Some local reporter with a perfectly rehearsed frown stood in front of a camera and delivered her piece. Residents of Sage Hills Estates say they've been trapped for days after a neighboring landowner closed the only access road. The dispute centers around a retired Army veteran who revoked an easement agreement following an HOA fine over a tractor. They filmed the sign, the gate, even my mailbox, blurred my name, but not my address. Within hours, my inbox filled with messages ranging from "you're a hero" to "you're a menace." I ignored them all. Meanwhile, HOA members were melting down online. Their Facebook page turned into a war zone. Some residents demanded Karen's resignation. Others blamed me for being unneighborly. I saved screenshots of every post where someone threatened to force access to my road. Jennifer told me to keep the records. Evidence of harassment. The next day, one of the HOA board members, a corporate lawyer named Michael Crane, called me privately. His voice was calm, careful. "Clint, look, I think Karen's gone too far. Most of us never agreed to that fine. We didn't even vote on it. She's running the board like a dictatorship." I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "You all signed the original agreement. You knew the terms." "I know." He sighed. "But you have to understand, people are panicking. That road's our only reliable access. You've got leverage now. Just maybe don't burn the bridge entirely." I hung up without promising a thing. That night, I stood by the gate watching the headlights of SUVs lining up at the far end, drivers glaring through their windshields, helpless. For the first time in a long while, I felt no guilt, just satisfaction. I hadn't picked this fight, but I sure as hell was going to finish it. The first sign that things were about to escalate came late Sunday night when my motion sensor floodlights kicked on at the far west edge of the property. I was in the workshop, oil-stained up to my elbows, rebuilding the hydraulic arm on a skid steer when the alert buzzed my phone. I wiped my hands and pulled up the feed. There, on the grainy night vision footage, were two figures in dark clothing, standing just outside the fence line near the gate, one of them clearly holding a phone or camera. They stood there for a minute or so, filming the gate, the sign, even the keypad, then turned and walked back toward a waiting sedan parked just off the easement trail. I didn't call the sheriff. Not yet. I just saved the footage, dated, and backed it up twice. The next morning, I made a few upgrades. New trail cams with higher resolution, overlapping fields of view, and infrared. I added another sign on the gate too. Area under video surveillance, 24/7. Data stored off-site. Then I called Bob Langley. Bob's an old friend from the Army, former reconnaissance specialist. He owns a ranch a few counties over, but when I told him what was happening, he laughed and said, "Sounds like you're hosting your own HOA boot camp. Be there by nightfall." True to his word, Bob rolled in just after sunset, a beat-up Chevy truck rattling down the gravel. He brought a cot, a thermos full of blacker-than-death coffee, and a scope that made my trail cams look like kid toys. We set up a little lookout post in the old grain silo near the ridge. The plan wasn't confrontation, just eyes on everything. That week, the HOA cranked the pressure to 11. First came the letter from the County Department of Transportation, alleging that my new gate posed a potential public safety hazard. Apparently, Karen had filed a complaint saying the closure endangered emergency access. Jennifer handled it easily. She provided documentation proving the road was never designated for emergency services and that the county itself had affirmed it as private during the 2019 agreement. Next came the Planning and Zoning Committee. Same story. Complaint alleging unpermitted modifications to community-adjacent infrastructure. Jennifer responded with aerial plats, property lines, and a charmingly vicious legal memo that ended with the phrase, "We look forward to deposing Ms. Avery should this matter proceed." None of the officials pushed further. They knew better than to challenge a clean deed backed by decades of surveys and an attorney who wrote like she enjoyed blood in her coffee. But the real fireworks came on Friday. That morning, I was sipping coffee when Bob came in from his perch at the silo and dropped a folder on the table. Inside were still shots from the night before. Karen, unmistakable in a beige tracksuit, along with two men I didn't recognize, standing on the edge of my south property line. One of them had a measuring wheel. The other carried a clipboard. Surveyors, or at least pretending to be. "They weren't here 5 minutes," Bob said. "Drove in through the old livestock path by the creek. Real quiet. Didn't cross the fence line, but they wanted to." I stared at the photos for a long time. Karen wasn't going to stop. Not with letters, not with shame, and apparently not with legal walls. She was testing the perimeter now, seeing where the cracks were, how far she could push before someone pushed back. I didn't call the sheriff. I didn't need to. I sent the photos to Jennifer and to Michael Crane, the only HOA board member with half a functioning conscience. I included a short note. "One more step over the line and I sue for coordinated trespass, all parties, individually." Michael replied 2 hours later, just 2 words. "Understood. Disgusted." But Karen didn't stop there. No. That same afternoon, my tenant in Hangar 3, a guy named Luis who builds custom dune buggies, came by to say someone from the HOA had knocked on the gate while he was working. They claimed they were collecting visual data to document shared impact environments. Luis didn't let them in, obviously, but he said one of them tried to take pictures through the fencing. They leaned over, shoved a phone between the bars like they were shooting a documentary about gorillas in the mist. Enough was enough. I went down to the gate and posted one more sign right at eye level. "By court-backed agreement, this is private land. Unauthorized entry or recording, trespass. Violators will be prosecuted and publicly shamed." I meant every word. And then, to really twist the knife, I drove into town, found an old-school sign shop, and had them make a decorative metal placard in the exact style Sage Hills uses for its front gate. White font, green background, gold trim. It read, "Welcome to Weston Ranch, where HOA bullshit comes to die." I mounted it just above my camera box at the main gate. The next day, someone threw eggs at it. I checked the footage. Karen's license plate. Twice. It was barely 2 in the morning when the emergency alert buzzed on my phone like a hive full of angry hornets. Not the usual motion trip, not just the outer perimeter sensors. This one came from the creek path, a remote strip of land that ran parallel to the old cattle route behind my barn, leading into a low valley where the terrain dipped into a steep ravine. A place no one had any business being, especially at that hour. I rolled out of bed and checked the live feed. 4 headlights, 2 trucks. Moving slowly across terrain that hadn't seen a grader since Reagan was in office. The lead vehicle was a flatbed. Behind it, a white SUV with HOA plates and a rooftop hazard light, blinking like some makeshift authority badge. On the flatbed, a load of gravel and what looked like a metal gate in parts. They weren't just snooping this time. They were trying to build their own damn entrance. I was halfway into my boots when Bob burst into the room, still wearing his thermal gear and holding binoculars. They've got contractors with them, probably private. You want me to call the sheriff? I paused. My gut said yes, but something deeper, meaner, told me to wait. Not yet, I muttered. Let 'em dig their own grave first. We both headed for the ridge and watched from the overlook. The trucks crawled toward the ravine, headlights sweeping over the old wooden footbridge that hadn't supported a real load since the 90s. Karen herself was there, standing in rubber boots and a reflective vest, barking orders like she was leading a FEMA response team. She gestured wildly at the drivers and waved around a clipboard. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but the way she jabbed her finger toward the ravine said everything. She thought they were going to make it through. They didn't. The first truck crossed slowly. The bridge creaked like a dying whale, the timbers bending under the weight. Halfway across, one of the planks gave way with a sharp crack. The rear axle dropped, and the truck lurched sideways, spilling a load of gravel right into the ravine. The second truck swerved to avoid it, and that's when it happened. The slope beneath them, already softened by last week's rain, gave out completely. Dirt, gravel, tires, all of it slid into a sucking mess of wet clay and splintered wood. The rear wheels of the flatbed sank down to the frame. The SUV behind it rocked violently, the driver punching the horn like that would somehow stop gravity. And Karen, she screamed. I recorded the whole thing. Bob, ever the soldier, scanned the chaos and said dryly, "Well, I guess that's the emergency access route." We waited a few minutes. No one was hurt, but now they were stuck. In the mud, in the dark, in my back 40, without a legal leg to stand on. That's when I called the sheriff. "Y'all better send a unit," I said calmly. "We've got trespassers with heavy equipment on private land. Looks like they tried to cut a road through a protected riparian zone. I got camera footage and GPS logs." Deputy Henson showed up 40 minutes later with 2 more units and a floodlight truck. When they hiked down into the ravine and found Karen caked in mud, screaming at the contractor who was trying to dig a tire out by hand, the whole scene turned into a farce. Henson called for a tow, took statements, and then did the one thing I didn't expect. He called the county environmental officer. See, that creek isn't just a muddy ditch. It's part of a designated waterway corridor, protected land, which meant any unauthorized vehicle crossing it wasn't just trespassing, it was violating county environmental code. The next day, Karen received a formal warning from the county prosecutor's office. The contractors she hired were each fined for improper access. And as for the emergency easement she tried to create, it was ruled a reckless construction attempt on private property, punishable by additional civil penalties. I didn't press charges, not yet. Instead, I had Jennifer file a temporary restraining order blocking any physical access by HOA officials or their agents to within 100 feet of my property lines. And I included the new evidence, time-stamped drone footage, the failed road attempt, the still shots from the bridge collapse, and even a screenshot of Karen standing ankle-deep in mud, holding her ruined clipboard like the remains of a battle flag. By Tuesday, the court granted the TRO. Karen's face in the hearing was the picture of disbelief. She kept whispering to her lawyer like he was supposed to have a magic wand. After the hearing, Michael Crane caught me in the hallway. "You know, Clint," he said, "this could all end if she just apologized." I looked him in the eye and said, "Michael, at this point, I'd rather fund a whole new mountain range than hear her say sorry." He didn't argue. The restraining order might have been a legal win, but it did nothing to soothe Karen's bruised ego. For a woman who built her identity on dominance, open houses, board votes, fake smiles, and petty victories, the idea that some tractor hermit had legally humiliated her in court wasn't just offensive, it was unthinkable. And worse for her, public. By Friday, the story had leaked. Local station KTXF ran a short segment titled, "Private Landowner Blocks HOA Access After Dispute Over Vintage Tractor." It was meant to be a fluff piece. 30 seconds of rural drama before sports, but it took off like a wildfire. By Monday, a clip of the court hearing, Karen's incredulous "he owns the whole damn road," had been clipped, memed, and shared across TikTok and Reddit. People made remixes. Someone edited her voice into a country song. "Karen, get off my land," hit 70,000 streams in 2 days. And me. I stayed quiet. I didn't talk to reporters, didn't post anything online, didn't even leave the ranch for 3 days. But the silence wasn't inactivity, it was focus. With the road sealed and the TRO in effect, I hired a contractor to reinforce the western easement route. Not just fresh gravel, I had culverts repaired, a water runoff trench dug along the slope, and the entrance fully paved with a solid concrete pad and retractable bollards. Overkill? Maybe, but I wasn't about to be caught off guard again. Meanwhile, Jennifer filed 2 more civil claims, one for damages to the creek bed and footbridge, the other for breach of easement agreement. And Bob, ever the strategist, suggested we go further. "Let's audit every time they violated the deal since 2019, he said. "Make it an avalanche." So we did. We went through surveillance logs, county emails, even drone records. Every instance where HOA vehicles exceeded speed limits on the easement. Every unauthorized inspection, every camera spotted near the boundary line. We built a timeline of their nonsense going back 4 years. But while we were playing chess, Karen was playing flamethrower. On Wednesday afternoon, a letter arrived. Not certified, just a folded sheet dropped in my mailbox. No return address. Handwritten. "You don't belong here. You're a liability to this community. You will not win." Inside was a printout of an aerial photo. My ranch, with 3 red X's marked in pen, one on the gate, one on my workshop, one on the hangar row. It wasn't threatening exactly, but it wasn't a love letter either. Bob read it and muttered, "She's losing control." That night, we upgraded security. More cameras, motion floodlights with alerts. I let Luis and the other tenants know what was going on just in case. No one panicked. Most of these guys were ex-military welders or just hard-nosed tinkerers who knew how to handle themselves. But Karen wasn't done. The next morning, I got a call from the county fire marshal's office. They'd received an anonymous report that I was illegally storing flammable materials, something about diesel drums and acetylene tanks near residential areas. It was nonsense, but they were required to inspect. I met the marshal at the gate, showed him around, and he could barely hide his smirk. "I'm sorry we have to waste your time, Mr. Weston," he said, waving off the complaint. "You've got better containment than half the fire stations I've seen." But the game was clear now. Harass, delay, provoke. Karen was using every system she could, environmental, fire code, zoning, to make me blink, to make me angry enough to slip up. She didn't know that I don't blink. Not anymore. Jennifer sent cease and desist letters to 3 county departments that week, demanding the source of the complaints be identified. Legally, they couldn't release names. Yet. But her pressure was working, and behind the scenes, she began preparing a defamation case, one that would name Karen personally. Then came the board meeting. I wasn't invited, obviously, but the HOA held it in the community clubhouse, and someone, probably Michael Crane, leaked the audio. Full recording, Karen shouting, others pushing back. One homeowner yelling, "We're trapped behind a goddamn locked gate because you fined a guy for his tractor?" Another voice chimed in, "Why are we paying legal fees for your crusade?" Karen lost her temper, said something about showing these rural types who's in charge. The room fell silent. By the end of the week, 4 board members resigned. Half the residents signed a petition to suspend Karen pending investigation. And the kicker. A surveyor's drone, registered to a Sage Hills contractor, is crashed on my property, right on the paved portion of the easement. I found it smoldering near the fence, wings snapped, camera intact. I mailed it back to the HOA in a box filled with tractor grease and chicken feathers. No note, but I made one thing clear. The game was over. I was done reacting. Now it was my turn to strike. I don't remember the last time I wore a tie, but that morning I put one on. Not for vanity. For war paint. The courtroom was packed tighter than a cattle chute. Karen sat 3 rows ahead with her lawyer, her arms folded like she was already rehearsing the victim act. She wore a pale blue blazer and a pin that said "Community First." The irony nearly made me laugh out loud, but I wasn't here to smile. I was here to finish this. The court had consolidated the claims: unauthorized surveillance, breach of easement agreement, attempted construction without permits, and civil harassment. Jennifer handled our opening with the precision of a sniper, calm, direct, relentless. She laid out the facts one after another: the easement agreement, the recorded violations, the drone footage, the creek bed disaster, the harassment attempts, the anonymous letter. Every image was time-stamped, logged, authenticated. Karen's attorney, some smug firm guy from Dallas in a tailored suit and a $500 haircut, tried to paint me as aggressive, territorial, unwilling to compromise with community interests. He even brought up the tractor again, said it was provocatively placed. Jennifer didn't blink. She pulled out the easement contract, flipped to Section 6, and read it aloud. Any interference, surveillance, or overreach from the party of Sage Hills HOA into the operations, equipment, or privacy of Weston Ranch shall render this agreement null and void at the discretion of the landowner. The judge nodded, slowly, then asked the HOA attorney, "Did your client fly drones over Mr. Weston's property?" He stuttered. Well, that footage was collected to evaluate the impact of visual debris on—" Answer the question. Yes. Once, maybe twice. Jennifer stood. "We have 7 separate incidents logged, Your Honor, from 3 different drones, all operated by HOA security or their contractors. One drone even crashed on Mr. Weston's land. He returned it in a box with axle grease." A few chuckles rippled through the room. Even the bailiff smiled. We moved to the environmental damage next. Photos of the broken bridge, collapsed ravine slope, and stuck vehicles. County inspection reports confirmed the construction was done without permits and in violation of waterway protections. The prosecutor from the district's environmental division had submitted a separate brief, confirming the HOA was facing potential fines of over $80,000. Karen looked like she was about to faint, and then came the moment that broke her. Jennifer played the audio from the leaked HOA board meeting. Karen's voice echoed across the room, clear as a bell. "We're not letting some backwoods tractor freak tell us what this community should look like." The room went dead silent. Karen's attorney tried to object. Illegally obtained, irrelevant to civil claims, but the judge allowed it, said it illustrated motive, character, and intent. That phrase alone was the nail in the coffin. By the end of the day, the court found in our favor on all claims. The final ruling was delivered Thursday morning. The easement contract was formally terminated in perpetuity. The HOA was permanently barred from using Weston easement route. Karen Avery was found personally liable for harassment, trespass, and damages totaling $280,000. The HOA was fined an additional $50,000 for environmental violations. The court issued a restraining order against Karen and any agents acting on her behalf. When the gavel dropped, Karen slumped into her seat like air had left her lungs. She didn't look at me once. As I exited the courtroom, Michael Crane followed me outside. He looked wrecked, sunken eyes, suit wrinkled, the weight of 28 furious homeowners clearly on his shoulders. "I want to say, I'm sorry, Clint," he said. "This got way out of hand." "No," I said, holding his gaze. "She got out of hand. The rest of you just let her." That night, the Sage Hills HOA board held an emergency meeting. Karen was removed by vote. A third of the residents signed a motion to dissolve the HOA altogether. Another third demanded a full audit of finances and legal expenditures. The rest? They just wanted a way to get home without driving through 3 feet of mud, which they couldn't anymore because the easement was gone, and the only way in now was through the mountain. The gate stayed locked, not out of spite, well, maybe a little, but out of principle. The Weston easement route was mine again, legally, permanently, without condition. And while the ruling didn't require me to install a minefield, it didn't say I had to make things easy either. Over the next 2 weeks, construction trucks rolled up the ridge behind Sage Hills. Surveyors in neon vests climbed the slope with tripods and grumbling under breath. The only realistic path, in or out now, required carving a new road through limestone, dodging erosion zones, and applying for a dozen permits. Estimated timeline, 18 months. Cost, over $2.7 million. Not HOA money, resident money. Karen's legacy. Me. I went back to work. The tractor, the infamous one, was still parked near the hangar. I gave it a fresh coat of olive drab, touched up the insignia on the side, and built a wooden sign next to it. "This tractor find your ego, now walk the hill." People loved it. Tenants took photos with it. Even a passing reporter from the Fort Worth Sentinel stopped by and asked if I'd do an interview. I declined, but offered him some iced tea and let him photograph the gate. The piece went viral. The headline: "The man who shut down an HOA with a tractor and a contract." I could live with that. Jennifer wrapped up the final filings. Karen's assets were being reviewed for seizure. She'd taken out personal liability insurance as board president, but that only covered a portion. Rumor was she had to sell her condo in Austin and one of her rental homes to cover damages. No one's sure where she moved. One guy said he saw her working at a staging company in Dallas under a different name. Another swore she went to Florida to start over. The rest of the HOA scrambled. Michael Crane stepped down 2 weeks later. A new board was elected, mostly made up of younger couples and retirees who just wanted peace. They offered to reopen discussions about limited access, promising new terms, oversight, even a monthly stipend. I declined, not out of revenge, but because once you give a snake back its fangs, it bites again. And besides, the mud trail built character. One day, I saw an older couple walking up the hill with groceries. I met them halfway with my ATV and gave them a lift. They laughed, said they didn't blame me. "We voted against that damn fine," the man said. "She just ran wild with power." Another time, a teenage girl from the community emailed me asking if she could interview me for her civics project, a paper on local land rights and governance. I agreed, on one condition: no TikToks. She kept her promise. Smart kid. Asked good questions. Probably a future lawyer. As for me, life settled back into its old rhythm: wrenches, diesel, the occasional deer at the edge of the fence line. I fixed up the bridge Karen's crew had wrecked just because I couldn't stand to look at it mangled, painted it red, and named it Karen's Folly. The tenants at the hangars stayed put. In fact, I got more inquiries than usual. Apparently being the guy who destroyed an HOA's power structure made you something of a folk hero. People mailed me thank you cards. One guy even sent a model of my tractor made from scrap metal. It sits on my desk. I didn't do any of it for fame. I didn't want a parade. I just wanted my land respected. Funny thing about folks like Karen, they think ownership is about titles, committees, and fences. But out here, we know different. Ownership is sweat in the dirt, knowing your fence line better than your own reflection, standing firm when someone thinks paper trumps principle. In the end, all she had was paperwork. I had the road.